Today is an important day to me. I think it should be normal for a son to be called to represent his father. In my case, it hasn't always been so simple. My father received a lot of awards. I don't even think he really knew how many. Today, he's going to be honored for his outstanding contribution to sport in Britain. 10 years after his death. My life is a long blur of nights out. I know I don't have a good reputation. I use a lot of drugs and a lot of alcohol, and I've been with a lot of the wrong people in the wrong places, so I suppose I deserved it.
Just present that for me there. Lovely. Just present that trophy for me, Alex, as well. That's lovely. Perfect. Give me a nice smile there. That's great.
Alex was George's second wife. I like her. She's 9 years older than me, and I used to think it was so cool my dad had such a young, hot wife. Except the day he came home completely drunk and accused his 14-year-old son of having a relationship with his young fiancée. He put his hand around my throat, and he shouted, "You are not my fucking son." My father will always be in my life as a distant figure, something out of focus, someone who was mysterious and fascinating. I spent years trying to get closer to him, failing every time. Everybody loved him, but I can't say that I never hated him. I'm Callum Best and I'm single. Well, relationship, my ideal woman, easy enough.
More tune it, please.
Do I sound like I'm singing my praises like Bone Smoke about it?
Just a tune it. Just
No,
no,
you don't.
Do you have a favourite memory of your dad?
My favorite memory would be when I think I was about 12, maybe 13, and he took me to Old Trafford to watch United for the first time and bought me a Best jersey. And I remember just walking around the grounds and being super excited and super proud and a really cool moment.
Do people constantly still talk about him to you? People you've never met before?
Yeah, when I'm here doing an interview about a new show at 35 years old, I'm still getting asked about my dad. But I'm okay with it because it's my dad and I'm his son and I'm born into this thing and I'm very proud of it. But I sometimes think, oh, I've got so much going on and I've worked so hard to grow into my own person and do my own thing that I wonder if there will be a point where that ends. But if it doesn't end, so be it. This is the life I live and I'm happy with it. But sometimes I want to say we don't need to talk about that. It has no relevance as such. But I'm grateful and I'm blessed. But I'll fucking sing his praises all day long. Sorry to keep swearing.
No, swearing's fine. I suppose the reason it's particularly in this interview is because it's going to look at your life.
I'm not from London. I'm not grounded here. For a long time, my life in this city didn't feel real. Girls, as soon as you've got your stuff on, just come downstairs, please. How could anybody live up to a father like George Best? But at the time, I knew there was one way I could. When you were a myth, people always forgive you. For me, it wasn't always the case.
Skinny little runt, isn't he?
He's anorexic.
Oh, you look so good.
And you don't.
That's fine.
And you're a dick.
And why don't you take a picture of me real quick? Sweet, yeah.
You look so good.
Your nails look really blue.
That's fine.
Callum, you're fucking treading on thin ice here, mate. You nearly got beaten up on the street. You're so lucky you didn't get bashed on the street. What do you mean? I tried to fucking help you out, mate. I said get into a taxi. You nearly got fucking bashed on the street. Don't be such a fucking cocky prick.
Can I...
Relax, man.
Sorry?
What do you mean relax? Don't be such a cocky cunt. You've nothing to back.
My way with money is the same as my dad, but the money I burn is mine. Once, a guy told me I'd wasted my father's fortune. This is what people think. George had no fortune and left me nothing. Newspapers love to make that connection, like father, like son. I don't see myself as the same kind of drinker as my dad. I drink socially, not on my own and not every day. I'm a different person.
Hey, mate, you nearly got beaten up on the street. You're so lucky you didn't get bashed on the street.
I didn't mind being described as a playboy, but when Playboy turned to seedy Lothario, something had to change. I have to solve my identity problem. Who I want to be. Myself, or the son of a great footballer. I love Belfast. It will always hold a place in my heart. On the day of my dad's funeral, you couldn't move from the amount of people lining the streets. Hundreds of thousands paying their respects. Farewell, our friend, but not goodbye. Your time has come, your soul must fly. To dance with angels, find the sun, but how we'll miss our special one. He walked amongst us just a while, weaved your magic, made us smile. Your life was so full of light and tears, we lived it through you, through the years. We won't forget our Belfast boy, he filled our lives with so much joy. Your star will shine now in the sky. Farewell, our friend, but not goodbye. Losing my father sent me into a bad place. The worst, the lowest moments of my life. I began to believe I was worthless, that my life had no purpose. I was nothing more than the son of my father, a father that rejected me all the time when he was alive. I was ashamed of myself. I didn't know that he was about to have a liver transplant. Nobody told me. I heard the breaking news that they had found a matching liver for the soccer legend George Best on the radio when I was in the cab. That was the day of the surgery operation. I went straight to the Cromwell Hospital. When he opened his eyes, he told me that it would be different, a new beginning. He'd never spoke to me like that.
George Best is tonight facing a new battle against the bottle. It follows.
I've known my father sober for about 3 weeks of my life. My dad is an idol to millions of people, but he has suffered too. His mother died in October 1978, and he was devastated. He hadn't seen her for 2 years because he'd always run away from the trouble. Trouble in this case, of course, meant his mother's drinking. I guess he visited his family so rarely because he couldn't face seeing the state his mother was in.
You alright?
Yeah, you doing thing for your dad?
Yeah.
Brilliant.
Yeah, alright?
Yeah, it's definitely really good.
Doing good, how are you?
Yeah, we're doing good.
Nice one, have a good one,
Yeah,
yeah?
you too, yeah. See you later.
Doesn't even look like my dad. Looks like a
the
like
artist is really bad.
yeah, like
but
his,
it's incredible.
his nose is like a.
For a long while, I had some fantasies of being a footballer. Pretty soon, it became clear to me that I'm not as good as people would expect me to be, being the son of George Best. My dad cast a big shadow, but I had another option. Modeling. And at the beginning, nobody knew who my father was. When George ended up in the hospital again in 2000, suddenly a move to London made perfect sense to me. I decided to pack up my life in LA and move close to my father. I had no idea of what was going to happen. Here I spent an important part of my life. Many good things and many bad things happened to me. I'll never forget the first time I read my name in the press next to Kate Moss and Mick Jagger, just because I was at the same party. But I will also never forget the Christmas I spent eating beans alone on my sofa. Wow, she's gorgeous.
Isn't she beautiful? Is that nice, Mama? Are you enjoying the sunshine today?
With her little white dot and her is she two-tone or is she just shaved?
Shave. There we go, Mama's for you.
Yeah.
There you go.
My family is very small. Me, my mom, my aunt, and a few cousins. Angie moved to the US to be a model. She worked for Cher, that is actually my godmother. I carried painful anger with me for a long time. It hasn't been easy for her raising me as a single mom.
Years ago, I wanted to do an autobiography book, right? And nobody, because years ago I wasn't quite clear-headed as I am now, nobody years ago was keen to do it. Finally now, I put a treatment. First I wanted to do an autobiography about my whole life, right? Telling the days of Malibu, telling the days of going to Milan, telling the days of the Playboy Mansion, the partying and the father and the how I am now, you know? No.
Why?
Well, just because I want to do an autobiography. No, nothing deeper than that. People are doing autobiographies. People are buying houses from autobiographies they sell. And I've had a fucking crazy life, you know what I mean? The thing is you are the only person that I know that really knew my dad, you know what I mean? And that's why I think during this whole process, you will be someone I keep coming back to and saying, okay, Mom, this has happened. Is that any truth? Do you remember that? Dad. Blessed in many ways, but fuck me, there was some dark shit along the way, you know? Yeah. But biggest fear I have is that everybody I knew loved my dad. And now I've got to sow some shit that ain't so pretty. But I don't want it to be a nasty thing, and I don't want it to be a thing that actually even tarnishes him. I just want people to see a son trying to figure out who his alcoholic dad was, because I'm in the limelight at the end of the day.
In my opinion, they say it's a disease. It's not a disease. It's a choice. If they wouldn't have AA if it wasn't a choice.
Yeah.
I used to say I could walk into a room with George stark naked and nobody would know. All the eyes would be on George,
him.
which was the truth.
Yeah.
The fascination with him because of his looks, his charm, the blue eyes, the dimple, he had to live up to that.
Yeah.
And in living up to that, he became a victim of his own reputation.
But I want to know who the fuck spoke to my dad on normal terms, you know? What the fuck did he like to do? What did he talk about? Who has a goddamn real...
He was very introverted.
Yeah, I thought so as well. Even when I would be with him, he would go into a bar and he would sit in the corner by himself, doing crossword puzzles.
Yeah.
Didn't want to know, didn't want to talk.
No.
People would approach
Because
him.
he didn't have to.
Yeah.
He never had to. It was always George, and then everybody would... He never had to go and get anything.
Yeah.
It all came to him.
Yeah.
It's a bit like your life. You've never had to go and get anything.
Yeah.
It's all come to you.
Yeah.
This is your journey. This is a boy's journey to find out who his dad was.
Yeah.
Because his dad was drunk every day of his life.
Yeah.
It's a natural progression of from your father to the son.
Yeah.
And you're lucky that you've come out, because there are lots of people, lots of movie stars and famous people whose children didn't come out good on the other
Yeah.
end. And that, how sad is that?
Yeah, proper.
But think how many more.
I get anxiety thinking about it, you know what I mean?
The time children spend with their parents, in which they don't remember, isn't wasted. It affects the child's relationship with their parent forever, for good or bad. My dad is a stranger to me. People knew him very well, describing his mysterious magnetic aura. I never had access to it. Phil was much more than a simple agent for George. He wrote a book titled Remember Me from My Football. He was always there for him. He was the man that knew him the best.
There he is. There's some fetching headgear on. I remember quite clearly when George was living in Oakley Street that he had a big box of trophies, and he said to Callum, take your pick, whatever you want. And there was the European Footballer of the Year award there, and British Footballer of the Year award, and various other nice awards. And Callum picked out a snooker trophy, you know, that George had won in a pub. So he wandered off and took I'm sure he still got it, hopefully. He took that back to America with him. Some memorabilia that George has given me over the years, and, you know, as much as I love it myself, I'd like Callum to have it, because I know he didn't have anything from his dad. I was a big fan of George Best and Manchester United, and I'd heard that he was associated with the bar just down the road from where I was working in Regent Street. So I popped in there for a drink one night, and George walked in, which was amazing. And he said hello, and I was doing a crossword. And George stood next to me, and he was looking, because George was fanatical about crosswords. Just looked over my shoulder, and he said, "Are you stuck with that?" And I wasn't at all, but I said yes. So he started helping me with the crossword. He said, "Are you here tomorrow night?" And I had no intention of being, but of course again I said yes. And I went there and we started chatting again, and we just built up a friendship over there.
Right now I am calling my bank to transfer back £2,000 to the agent for the club that Callum missed on Friday, the PA that he missed, because he was out and he disappeared for a few days. Just be a second. It's painful.
My father had a glint in his eyes that could make everything possible. His sentences are still famous. I spent a lot of money on booze, birds, and fast cars. The rest I just squandered. The irony is I lost my dad to these subjects.
I'd heard this phrase, you know, I wasted a lot of money on fast cars and women, and the rest I squandered. And I said this to George, I said, that's a good line, isn't it? It's quite funny. And I'm 100% certain he said, no, John Conte said that. But he must have used it at some stage later, because he did laugh at the time when I said it. He said, yeah, it's good, that. But I'm sure he said it was John Conte's saying. John Conte had said it first. But he obviously had used it later on, because it's now famously associated with George. It's no secret that George had a huge drink problem, and it wasn't just, you know, go out and have a few drinks and get drunk. It was ridiculous amounts of drink. I hated him drinking brandy. You know, I could go through a bottle a night of brandy. Of course I was worried about George, and we used to talk about the drink, and he'd always say, I'll be alright, Husey, don't worry about me, I'll be alright. But no, to try and stop him drinking, you know, what would you do? Wherever he went, he could get a drink. You know, it'd be like when he stayed here a lot. You know, what should I do? Hide all the bottles of wine or whatever? You know, all I'd do is drive him away. At least when he was here, he was safe. You couldn't strong-arm George into doing anything. If George didn't want to do something, he wouldn't do it. Whatever the money or for whoever it was. He wanted that picture taken, and he was quite happy for it to be in the press for a lesson for people who was just starting their drinking careers, to show, you know, it's not a pretty ending. I certainly wouldn't have ever taken that picture if I thought that was the last picture I was ever going to take of him.
In 2015, I wrote and released a book about my relationship with my father. I started the book by admitting that I was terrified of what people would think of me after they read it.
I think it was a bit of a shock. There were a lot of older people, like Michael Parkinson, Jimmy Tarbuck, who said, don't do it, save it for your shrink. But I think the book being published was really good for Callum. It's a big for him. It's a big sigh, a big relief. And I think now he can move forward, recognising that he is George Best's son, but he's also Callum Best.
My dad became an iconic figure. He has millions of fans that adored him. People don't like to see the dark side of their heroes. Even Barbara, the sister of my father, said that George Best would feel betrayed by me. It hurts.
When George died, Callum inherited his reputation, and he took it and ran with it and was very good at it. I think he's still a California guy, tell you the truth. He grew up in Malibu, and so he considers Malibu home. Freedom of lifestyle, that easiness, is who he is. He's a very free spirit. I didn't want to come home. Did not want to come back to this country. I was living in Malibu. It rains 2 weeks out of the year, and when it does rain, it's lovely warm rain. You don't get old in Malibu. You get old in this country very quickly. I had to come here. I couldn't let my son go the same way as my husband. I couldn't lose two of them that way. George took care of George, and everybody else around him had to fend for themselves. And Callum was one of those. He may have had George Best for a dad, but he also had a drunk for a dad. I mean, and a serious drunk. Drunk 24/7, 365. So He was learning his lessons the hard way, I think. It'll be interesting to see what happens in the future.
In July 1986, my relationship with my father was about to enter a new phase. My mom applied for divorce and for sole custody of me. It was the start of my mom's plan to move us back to the States. I wonder quite often what my life would have been if my mom hadn't made this decision. But I never doubt she made the right call. My mom was working for Cher as a personal trainer and assistant, but we lived close to the beach and we were very blessed. Here, I was me first, and I was George Best's son second. Adam is my best mate. We grew up together. I sometimes think how different it would have been if I stayed in Malibu. So then 18 comes around and everybody goes to college to either Santa Barbara or San Diego, but I know what that consists of, like 2 years of getting completely pissed and then bailing out of school. And I just think to myself, I just remember I had an opportunity to go travel Europe, and I thought, I've got to take that opportunity. But then I look at all my friends, like I look at you, or I look at like Pascal, or I look at Bo, or Brody even, and everybody still lives here, and like, they're totally, I mean, I'm content where I am, but I just think sometimes how different my life could have been if I stayed here and grew up in Malibu. What would I have done as a career choice? Like, what would I be doing with my life? And there were so many stories that I was nervous to tell because how much admiration there is for my dad, you know? Every single day someone's like, oh my God, we love your dad. You know, he's such an icon, he's such a legend, and he is many of those things, but you know that my dad is my dad. He wasn't George Best football, he was just my dad, you know?
You gotta understand, man, so this is how cool George was, because when I went to London, I was in my super punk rock phase. I was like wore shirts that said white trash, like holes ripped in my big like cut up jean shorts, you know? And your dad was just so mellow and cool. You were vibing. You're like, dude, come on, man, get it together, bro. Like, we're in London.
What was your intro to him? Because I remember before I went, if I had to explain to people about what my dad did or what, I was like, oh, he was an ex-footballer or ex-soccer player, but nobody over here kind of really understood that. You know?
Not at all. When we start walking, and he's getting like mobbed, and I could legitimately see people shivering like Michael Jackson just walked past him. And I'm like, dude, what does your dad do? And you're like, he plays soccer. And I'm like, no, that can't be it. Like he was in a movie or something, right? You're like, no, dude, he legitimately just plays football. And then that night, you guys drove me up to Manchester where he was commentating a game. That's how you say it, right? Commentating a game, and then I watched a Man U game, and I looked at the fans in the audience. I'm like, oh, okay, I get it. Yeah.
You understood the level.
He plays soccer. People are like eating their young.
And he was so happy to take good care of us, but at the same time, we'd get there, and he'd go on such heavy sessions of drinking that we were literally left to our own devices. So I did this book, dude, and the book is so hardcore because it talks about so many issues we went through that you were with me for a lot of them, you know? So I put that out there, and I was really worried about how it would react. And the negative feedback came from people that didn't read it. They only read inserts of kind of heavy shit, you know? Or people from Northern Ireland that are just, they hold him at such a level of God, that they don't want to hear a bad word said, you know?
happily moved back here because obviously my mom moved back to the UK because I was messed up years ago, and now she's built a little home for herself. So I couldn't just pack up my bags and move back here without her. I'd have to get her a place, myself a place. So it's a big process. I mean, in the UK, I got sucked into this kind of, I don't want to say celebrity, because, you know, some people might not know who I am, but this kind of world of becoming a persona of George Best's son. And they only know me as this kind of city football and dad stuff. They don't know about where I really grew up, you know? My next step after Malibu, after seeing my friends, is then going to San Jose, where I'll see my aunts and I'll see my cousins. What I want to learn from them is that who was my dad when he had me? Because they knew my dad when I was born.
George said, at the end, people will only remember the football. This is not true. I can't. I just wanted to be able to sit down with him and talk about his life. I just know what I've read or watched on a video or been told.
Oh yeah.
Very good, yeah. Actually, just coaching a soccer camp here in Malibu.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
No worry. What team's that then?
No, it's just a kids kind of like coast to coast summer camp. It's not like
Very cool, man. It's funny because I brought this. I came back here because I was remembering there's a sign over there that says the AYSO. When I was probably about 13 to about 17. This is the field that I used to play on.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, man. There used to be the goals up, and we went and traveled around, and teams used to come here, and it was such great memories. It's like the pitch doesn't get much better than this, does it? Really?
And the views. It's incredible.
I think about some of the pitches I play on now in London, and it just blows it away, doesn't it?
Exactly.
You know?
I didn't start playing football till about 13, but I found out I was pretty damn good at it. But when they found out my dad was George Best, everything changed. It was the first thing they judged me on. In 1994, the World Cup is on. Everybody was football mad that summer, even in the US. That summer, I invited my dad to coach a training session for my local soccer team, the Malibu Surf. That day, there were more people on the field than ever before. He worked us hard. And at the end, all the fathers asked for pictures with him. It was a proud moment, one of the best days of my life. I am born in San Jose, California, when George was playing for the San Jose Earthquakes. My Auntie Lindy still lives here. She's the sister of my mom and married to Chris Dangerfield.
Aston Villa. So this is the shirt I wore in the first soccer ball, which is for Portland Timbers, here at Spartan Stadium. Once again, we played Tampa Bay Rowdies. She was, at that particular time, probably, if not one of the best players in the world. I mean, even Pelé said that he was the best player in the world. And it was a pleasure just to meet him, number one. You know, the opportunity to play against and then play with and spend some time with him on a personal basis. I mean, these are the sort of things that you would, you know, you just put it into your special memory bank and you say, these were good times. When you had a chance to spend time with George in public settings, even in America, you could see the adoration and, you know, what a star he was. But in his everyday life, he could sort of walk around the streets somewhat unnoticed. And I think that was kind of a novelty. It must be to these guys. It wasn't to me because I wasn't that famous. But to players like he was, it must be quite a peaceful feeling to know that you could have a normal life again after the life he had led.
He was basically at the end of his career when he came here. I think he knew that he wasn't the legend that he used to be. My gut feeling is George always made an impact. And if he was going to go, it was going to be with a bang. And he did it.
I was fortunate because a lot of the time I spent, especially here in San Jose, when I was down in Los Angeles at Besties, yeah, but everybody was having a beer and it was a lot of fun and there's stories about that. But when he was here in San Jose, when I came here, he was actually going through a period. Callum had just been born. I think it was a very positive period in his life. He was really trying to make an effort to not have that be something that was, you know, constantly nagging away at him and was distracting him away from his family life that was important to him at the time. So there was a good period of time here in San Jose that he wasn't drinking. At that point, life was good.
I arrived on 6th of February 1981 at 7:02 a.m. Pacific time, which is 3:02 p.m. in the UK. This is pretty much exactly the same time and date of the Manchester United Munich air disaster in 1958. This coincidence pleased my dad a lot. Before I was born, he made all kinds of promises about how things would be different when he was a father. He stopped drinking for a few months, and he even tried feeding me on his own.
George loved people in his own way. He could only give so much. He loved Ange to death, but he hurt her by doing what he did. He loved Callum, but it was a distant relationship. Unfortunately, when she would send him off to go see him, he would go out and leave him in the hotel room or the apartment and stuff like that. So he just couldn't help himself.
Well, I think that's a disease, right? I mean, that's something that you have, and you need to have treatment to try and lose that problem. He tried to deal with it in the way that he could. I don't think he wanted to be an alcoholic, but none of these people really do they? I mean, you know, that's why they call it a disease.
The first time Callum was out as a newborn baby was at that stadium, and he scored that goal, and when he went through like 5 guys, and it was like the goal of the century.
So I know this is the old stadium, but someone said they might have this thing they dedicated to him. But
yeah, they might. Yeah, let's go in here and ask.
No worries, Sire. Thank you. The San Jose Earthquakes, and I know they don't play here anymore. They've moved to the new stadium. But a friend of mine that used to play back in the day said they used to have a gate or a entranceway that was a tribute to him called the George Best Gate. Did you hear anything like that? A name? No. Do you know if where they would move any old school stuff? Would they keep it around or? No. No worries.
No,
it's all good.
I'm a big soccer fan.
Okay.
So I would know that here.
Okay.
Yeah.
No, a guy named George Best. Do you know the name?
No.
Okay. It's a long time ago. It is very cool for me to be here. It's very cool for me to come back to somewhere where I was actually born that I know really nothing about. And I've seen the video in my head 7,000 times.
That's tough to stop, the damn brakes, and boy, it's tough to control. Best maneuvering unbelievably. Best still has it. I don't believe this move. That's the greatest soccer goal
I was on the sideline, and I don't remember it because if I'm honest with you, most of the memories I have of my dad and of here are a blur. You know, nothing is focused. Nothing, I can't see it. I can't picture anything perfectly. But I can feel it. I can know it was there, and I have blurred things. I have people telling me things, but so I'm trying to figure it out for myself and trying to put all the pieces together and gain the knowledge for myself to make it all make sense. But it feels good being here. It feels great, though. I think to myself, God, my dad was there at that one point, you know? And it might sound silly to some people, but it makes sense. And I feel him, and I think, wow, that's pretty fucking cool.
Oh, an outstanding goal. Unbelievable goal by George Best. Look at that move. And how about this one? Look at all the defenders trying to contain him. Never seen one better than that, boy, Joey. That was really fine, wasn't it? I've never seen one even close to that.
George once said, having Callum prove one thing. Alcohol become the most important thing in my life. More important than my wife, and even more important than my newborn son. I felt guilty I couldn't stop drinking, even for him, and probably drank even more because of my guilt. When I'm a month old, George goes into rehab and is away for months. Jack Rosenthal met him that time to write a screenplay about him. In one of the last scenes, George meets a great fan of his in a little California truck stop. He'd just come out from a rehab, and he's supposed to be off the alcohol. But when the man offered him a beer to celebrate, he accepted. He was a slave of the image he created. One messy night out, my brain goes back to how it used to be. The demons come back.
That's my son's grandma. There's Callum. One of his school shots. That's me modeling. You don't want that. The family. Him and Ange still. But whether he wants simply the best on there or not, I don't know. My mother kept all of these things. Callum became a lost soul for a while. We all know that. The tabloids, everybody knows that. Wow. My mum kept everything. Oh, there he is. I was his second mum. There was no question of it because Ange needed to get back to work. All the stuff was going on with George. He was always with us and very close to his cousins, and still is, as we know, because they're not here yet.
Hey!
Hey!
Oh, shit. I did what you asked me not to do, you know?
Uh-huh.
Oh, no, please don't blame me, though.
Oh, I'll blame my sons.
Fucking blame all of us together.
Checkbook. George left me his whole checkbook, signed. The whole book is signed. 12, 14. Do you remember this?
Oh, you know what? I fucking wish that I had some potential with this thing.
This one, I love. That one.
Oh my goodness,
That's how much your dad trusted me.
So I went to the yoga retreat.
You doing yoga?
I know. Can you imagine? I'm thinking to myself, 10 years ago, I was laughing at it.
Yeah.
Even 3 years ago,
Yep.
I wouldn't have pictured myself doing yoga.
Yep.
And now I just went to a yoga retreat.
I'm
Yeah.
happy when you're happy.
Yeah, good. Well, you know.
When you're healthy.
Yeah.
And when I know that leaving Malibu and coming back to England and seeing you turn yourself around and not go the same path as your father,
Yeah.
that
The
fills
whole
me
reason.
with joy.
Yeah, good.
Complete joy.
Even in the past 2-3 years, so much growth I'm finding out going on myself. Obviously just with age, getting more comfortable in my skin. My book was a massive factor on changing my life. I had an idea of what I wanted to do, you know? I sat there with my full beard having some crisis of what I'm doing with myself. You know, and to think however much time it's been since then, you know, I've created this and I want it to be yours. I thought I'd use it as an opportunity to start this new regime. Feeney Arms was his favorite place. During my summer visits, I spent most of my time here, playing cribbage and watching football. Now it looks very different from that time. It wasn't a healthy space, and he spent from 8 in the morning till 10 at night every day. He was a legend, but his only will was to spend the whole day here, drinking with normal people.
Oh my goodness gracious me.
Now, I'm finally ready to meet Phil.
Oh, fucking can't believe you dragged me back in.
I know, Phil, I'm sorry.
The only one really who knew who my father was. What kind of man he was behind the icon of George Best.
Is it Galliano?
Gascoigne.
It's not Gascoigne, no.
Is it not?
No.
Because he was with us, wasn't he?
He was. Oh, it is Gascoigne.
It is.
But he signed it twice then. He signed it twice, bless him. I've seen another Gaza somewhere.
You probably did.
Gaza.
We shared a lot of intense moments.
I used to walk in there sometimes and think to myself, God, my dad is one of these fucking iconic heroes to so many.
Yeah.
What is he doing staying in a place like this? But then I used to think to myself, it's probably because he wants a bit of quiet, a bit of time out. But even if he was in there, people would still fucking hound him.
He was a man of the people, honestly. I don't think you saw as much, but he was just a people's person. And he would mix with anyone.
George started a company to manage the George Best brand, and he asked me and Phil to be part of it. This meant the world to me, being part of my dad's legacy. And in the end, it didn't work. I never understand why.
I know how important you were to my dad. I know how important my dad was to you. And I just think to myself, why have I never come to you with questions before? But what's happened to me, Phil, is that I have to crack on with my own shit, you know? Because if I come to you and start worrying about my past and my things, I'll never grow as my own person. My book, for example, wasn't in any way to put my dad down, because I'm fucking, besides you, I'm his #1 fucking fan, you know what I mean? And love him to bits. But in this book, I had to explain all this shit that's going on inside of me. Phil, I was worried to see you because you remind me so much of my dad. I swear to God. And it upsets me because it reminds me, not in a bad way, but it upsets me because I think to myself, God, you and my dad were like wingmen, you know? And every time I saw my dad, I saw you. Every time I needed to talk to my dad, I'd talk to you, you know? And so, oh, it could kick me off, but you could tell that he was my fucking everything, you know? I came here to get to know him.
There's no denying the fact that he adored you, Callum. You know, and that was the other thing, the sad thing about your book, you know, that you didn't realise that how much he did love you.
The book for me was of clarity, but then there was still a few questions. I had questions like, did my dad say he loved me? Yeah, because he didn't say it to me. Did he say it to you? You know?
Your dad wasn't the type of person to say, come on, Callum, let's go to Alton Park Towers.
Talk about girls, he did it when we will.
Yeah.
But he didn't know how to really show any emotion to me at all. I genuinely don't remember him really giving me a hug properly. I don't remember him really telling me he loved me properly.
I wish you knew him like I did, because he was certainly a better friend to me than he was a father to you.
I was trying to think about what advice did my dad give me, what like words of wisdom. I couldn't fucking rack a single one in my brain. I remember one bit of advice he gave me in Henry J. Beans after a few drinks, and it was, don't trust the press, is what he said to me.
Yeah.
And it made sense to me after a few years, because I got that, because I'm like, yeah, they're pretty fucking ruthless, but
Absolutely.
I just don't know if he knew how to fucking communicate with me. There's two moments that I remember so clear of you and I together, is that one of them was, you called me and you said, come to my office. At the time, when my dad's around, I don't think about collecting that shit. I don't think about saving it. I don't think about having my own, because it's all there. And I'm like, it's my dad, oh, it's easy, it's all gettable, you know? So then I remembered my dad saying, I've got a business idea. My dad was supposed to sign, but never did. Is that the case?
He never signed this will and left me nothing.
I've got 3 or 4 bits that are lovely that I want you to have.
Oh, thank you.
I want you to have them.
I will do.
But they were, trust me, they're given to me.
I don't want to be a burden on anybody. You know, I don't want to be a burden on you if it's yours, because I know that you love my dad. You know what I mean? So I don't want to.
But I want you to have it.
Now, when I walk down the road, I don't hide my face anymore. Sometimes I thought that being self-destructive is genetic. Anyway, I can't blame someone for all the wrong that's happened to me. He was a shit dad to me, but he will always be part of me. Maybe and hopefully my story can be helpful to people who are going through similar things.
I play against a lot of good players, legends, but one I love, George Best. This one is the excellent player.